Let us pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, we come to you this morning. We thank you for the gift of life. We specifically thank you for the gift of children in this country, in the continent, and in the world. We also thank you for this summit, the organizers, the panelists, and for a successful day yesterday. We continue to dedicate the rest of the summit today before you. We ask you to guide us through. We ask you to inspire our panelists, and we ask you to continue to instill the interest to deal with children matters in the law students present here and those joining us online. And we continue to pray that you're going to be with us. We ask you to be with us and to bless and establish everything that we planned for today. For this we pray to the Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit.
Thank you for that, Patrick. I would like to request that everyone kindly rise for the national anthem. Take your seats. Sorry, there was a bit of confusion. Can you kindly rise again for the East African anthem?
Mungu twaomba uilinde Jumuiya Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike. Umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu. Uzalendo pia mshikamano viwe msingi wa umoja wetu, na tulinde uhuru na amani, mila zetu na desturi zetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike. Umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu. Viwandani na hata mashambani, tufanye kazi sote kwa makini, tujitoe kwa hali na mali, tuijenge jumuiya bora. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike. Umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
kindly take your seats. We would just like to begin the session by reminding everybody to kindly observe the COVID protocols in the institution, which requires that we sanitize regularly, wear our masks at all times, and yeah. So I would like to welcome Dr. Jane Waduta, who is the director of the Institute of Family Studies and Ethics, to give us her opening remarks and welcome the session.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to today's session. I think most of you were here yesterday. I see many familiar faces by now. Of course, also to those joining us online. We are really happy to have you all, whether in person or virtually. So it's a great honor for me to be making this opening and welcome and opening remarks, at least on behalf of Strathmore University Law School, Law Clinic, the Institute for Family Studies and Ethics, all of which are partners in the organization of this Child Justice Summit. Also recognizing the other partners that are working with us. That's, of course, the National Council for the Administration of Justice, the National Legal Aid Service, and the Child Fund, and many well-wishers. I think also in that line, I can also recognize the deans of the various schools that have joined us for this summit. We sent out a call reasonably good time, but the response also was very prompt in coming. And in any case, up to the last minute, we also got pleasant surprises. So about 14 universities, if I'm not wrong, are represented here together with the Kenya School of Law. And for a moment, I'd like just to recognize the universities that are here. If I call out your name, you can please raise your hand. African Nazarene, are you here? Yes, very good. Kwea, Catholic University Law School, very good. Welcome again. Kisii University Law School, fantastic. Welcome. Moi University, great. Yeah, they're among the ones who joined us in the walking tour yesterday. I think we had a good time. We left here like after 6:30 p.m. Then University of Embu, are you here? Fantastic, very good. Welcome again. Mount Kenya University, maybe they're joining us online or perhaps coming in a while. Jomo Kenyatta University School of Law, very good. Welcome again. Daystar University, yes, very good. Okay. Riara University, yeah, fantastic. Welcome again. Kenyatta University Law School, School of Law, Kusol, yeah, great, yeah. And then Egerton University, are you here? Maybe coming in person later or online today. Uma here. And have I missed out any university? Please, if you're here. And it's your chance also to identify each other, because one of the key aims of this summit, or at least opportunities, is the networking that you can do among yourselves. So I think it's very useful if you're able to identify who's who in the room, and then make use of the breaks and all before you leave today evening to get contacts and so on. Okay, so very well. And of course, Strathmore University School of Law, at least for those who are here in person or joining us online, I want to recognize their presence and collaboration. The ushers that are taking care of this event are from Strathmore Law School, and we really appreciate the collaboration from them. And also the kind lady here who is sanitizing the podium the whole day today. Yeah? Very good. And let me also acknowledge and appreciate once again the various speakers, dignitaries who were with us yesterday. Of course, recognizing first and foremost the Chief Justice, Lady Justice Martha Koome, for her remarks, which we've been notified already are available on the judiciary website for those who may have missed them or want to hear them again. We recognize the very close collaboration and participation of Lady Justice Teresia Matheka. She's the chairperson of the NCAJ Special Task Force on Children Matters. She already was here 2 days ago as a judge in the finals of the moot court, Cindy Wakio moot court. And she drove back to Nakuru the same day. So yesterday, she joined us online practically the whole day. Today as well, she will be with us. Also with her, I would want to recognize the presence of Lady Justice Lucy Gitari, a High Court judge, and also a very, very dedicated member of the Task Force on Children Matters. She was here yesterday, and if she's not here yet, she'll be joining us soon. And of course, also to recognize the different child justice actors who participated actively yesterday. Our problem was lack of time, because for you, I'm sure you all remember and hopefully got as much as you could from the presentation that was made on the role of child justice actors, recognizing in the earlier session, the Council of Governors was represented, the judiciary, the Director of Children's Services, the National Police Service would have been here, just that something came up and they could not make it. The person who was to speak could not make it. The National Legal Aid Service was represented, the Law Society of Kenya, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, Probation and Aftercare Services, Kenya Prison Service, Court User Committee, the Office of the Attorney General, and the State Department for Social Protection. I hope I haven't left out anyone. So we really have had a rich presence and participation. There's so much content to mull over still and draw as much as we can from. And also any opportunities for having a one-on-one conversation that can be tapped into better. For instance, the people from probation, that was Caroline Adero who spoke yesterday, and also Florence Mweni, they are not with us here today, but they are open to receive our questions. If we still want to get in touch with them, get some information, they're willing to get back to us or to any person who wants to hear from them. So as a law school, law clinic, and also as Institute for Family Studies, and the university as a whole, we are strong. We try very much to do what we can to promote strong and stable families. And we know that if the children are not stable, are not strong, are not taken care of, then we can hardly have strong families. And in order to have strong families, we count, of course, on the child justice actors, but we also count on the role that parents and family play, in order to achieve that aim. So IFS in that way is there to strengthen the family as such, because then that way children's welfare will be better taken care of. And because the justice system cannot work without family members to the extent possible. Institutions alone are not enough if you don't count on the institution of the family in its own right. So from the onset, when we shared the concept paper, we communicated that the target audience was law students. We deliberated over that. Should we open it up to practitioners in general? I know a few have joined us and more would have wanted to be here, but we thought let's prioritize the law student. And because of COVID, we couldn't open the invitation to just any number of people, but we asked for representation from each of the law schools and the Kenya School of Law. But keeping in mind the objectives which are contained in the program that you have and which were shared in the concept. And that's what I'm hoping that looking back at yesterday's event, the different sessions, and then the program as it looks today, and which we hope will go as smoothly as possible, just to see into what extent as a team and also as individuals, participants, we are aiming to identify and to achieve the objectives that are outlined there. There are 4, and I'll just go over them briefly, quickly. One of them, the first one, is to raise awareness and spur interest among law students about the structure of the child justice system and the actors involved. Yeah, so it would be so interesting. I won't do it now. I would love to, just to hear even from the floor, to what extent can we say our awareness has been raised, our interest has been, triggered, so that we understand better how the child justice system works, who the actors are. Secondly, to generate an understanding of career opportunities in the child rights field and the greater need to integrate child rights studies into law school curricula. This is something that is maybe in some cases, yes, the unit of children and the law perhaps is being offered, at least as an elective, but it would be good to know, for each school to see, is this unit offered? What more could we do as a school, including Strathmore Law School, in order to ensure that this unit is offered and is promoted, with the intent of helping the law students to understand how that area works and also have the interest to further their studies in that area and also work in that field. Thirdly, to discuss the challenges facing children within the child justice system and to assess the recent developments in the child justice sector. That's something we would have wanted to discuss in more detail in the session we had on the role of the child justice actors. Given the chance, we'd still want to hear them because it's very important that as law students, we understand, and all of us, of course, what are the challenges that they face and what are the recent developments? What is the progress that has been made so far towards resolving the problems, the challenges that they face? And there is then room for dialogue. The fourth objective is to engage in dialogue about potential solutions to the challenges facing children. So I think the law student wants not just to know what is happening, just to have an overview of the structure, the actors, and so on, but also to be aware of the problems and thus see what your contribution as law students can be towards resolving those challenges, for proposing solutions, even through your research, dissertation topics, journal articles, smaller conferences, symposia, interaction with the child justice actors in other fora, so that we work together to see how to better the situation of children. So hopefully with yesterday's content and today's as well, we'll go closer to achieving the objectives of this law summit. Later in the day, we'll have the launch of the Wakili wa Watoto Club. You may have received the brochure already. It's so colorful and nice, and it has already, you can get a preview of what's coming. There's a big banner, a beautiful banner along the road here outside this campus. And we look forward to that part of the program and to an enthusiastic uptake of this opportunity to launch our Watoto Wakili Club in our respective law schools and to make it thrive. Finally, I wish you a good day as participants, as panelists. Really grateful and happy to acknowledge the presence of the two speakers who will come after me, the chief of the Child Protection Unit or section of UNICEF, that's Monica Sandvik Nyland, and also Tomika Patterson, the head of the Department of Justice of US Embassy. I won't take over the MC's role. I just want to say we are really happy to have you here in person and virtually, and we look forward to your remarks, and we look forward to the rest of the program. Soon after that, we'll have a session, and the panelists are here already. Honorable Jackie Kibosia, Linda Ndambiri, Honorable Moses Wanjala. We really appreciate your presence, your support, and we look forward to what you have for us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Dr. Wadhuta. I would just like to remind everyone that if you have any questions for the third panel session on opportunities available to students, please hand in your questions. I think we'll have a sort of paper where you'll be able to write down your questions over the break. So next, I have the honor of welcoming Ms. Monica Sandvik Nyland, who is the Chief Protection of the Child Protection Section of UNICEF, who shall be joining us online to give her remarks. So can we please give a round of applause for Ms. Monica?
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I think I can hear an echo in my end, but I will proceed thinking that you can hear me. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you, and was very excited to hear about this event, and really impressed that you have 14 universities across Kenya participating in this, bringing I suppose the majority of current law students in Kenya to this event, or at least having an opportunity to listen to this event. And I hope that the recording will stay on YouTube, so those who are not able to listen to it today can do so later on. Really big congratulations to the NCAJ Special Task Force on Children and the Strathmore University for organizing this event. I think it's very strategic and very kind of really keeping your eyes on the horizon by really giving this opportunity for law students in Kenya to get this amazing immersion in what justice for children work really entails and what the issues involved are. So
recording in progress.
Really impressed with that. I thought I'd spend these minutes just to speak to you a little bit about child protection in UNICEF and where justice falls. Some of the kind of current thinking in UNICEF or strategies that we are trying to advance, and then finally a few points on terms of what we are doing in Kenya. Nutrition, we work in water sanitation and hygiene, and social protection. So these are all sectors that we engage in, and child protection is one of those sectors. And child protection for UNICEF is really about preventing children, whether offline or online, whether it's harmful practices or physical abuse, emotional violence, and so on. Other areas that we work in is also to look at, children who are not with their parents, so preventing separation of children from families, and also children who are cared for by institutions. Promoting really family-based alternatives for that. We are working also on civil registration, ensuring and working to promote access to legal identity, which of course is really relevant also for justice for children. When we talk about those safeguards that are attached to the age of the child, if you can't prove your age, you might not be able to access those safeguards. We are recently also during the COVID, increasingly also starting to look at issues around mental health and psychosocial support, which is again is really key to the justice sector. And then for all of these areas, I think justice for children really is kind of a common denominator in terms of really providing some of those safeguards, whether it's children who are survivors of violence and need to have access to justice, or whether it is about procedures around care arrangements or so on. So how do we do this? How are we trying to bring changes in these areas? So a few of the areas, of course, is related to the creating an enabling environment. So creating laws and policies that are protecting children, that are ensuring basic safeguards around justice, children in conflict and contact with the law. And we've been very much involved in supporting efforts to draft the children's bill, which has been going on for a long time, and that we are so eager to see go through and being adopted by the Parliament. We are trying to be a step ahead, have worked with NCAJ and various other actors in Kenya to also develop the following rules and regulations. So recently we've been involved in costing the children's bills. If it's once adopted, what is it going to cost to Kenya? What are the resources needed? And I think this is really an important component as well, to make sure that we don't just have laws and policies in place, but there are no resources to actually implement them. Another area of work is really about addressing social norms. We know that violence against children, in particular when we are talking about harmful practices, are really based in social norms and traditional practices. So how do we work with communities to actually change the way you think about this? How do we change perceptions around physical violence, corporal punishment against children? We work very closely with the Department for Children's Services as well, and that falls under work we call, addressing and strengthening the social service workforce. We know that the Children's Department and their officers are really key also in supporting children in contact and conflict with the law. So how can we ensure that they have the skills and the capacities needed to do that work? We are also, a key area is also about strengthening data around children. So you might know that there is a system called the Child Protection Information Management System in Kenya that is operated by the Department for Children's Services, and which is really key in order to track children who are in contact with the child protection system and so on. And we know that in the justice sector, the data is still quite a challenge in Kenya. Globally, UNICEF has various indicators that we look at when it comes to protection of children. And we've seen that one of the indicators that is constantly lagging behind is the indicators related to justice for children. So this is not just in Kenya, but it is also globally. So it has really resulted in UNICEF kind of taking stock and trying to see how we can do better, how we can support better governments in this area and how governments can do better. I think that the COVID pandemic, with everything that it has entailed, has also really shed a new light on the issues of justice for children. We have tried to track globally in terms of the number of children who have been released during the COVID. And we have so far, tracked about 11,000 children that have been released due to the COVID restrictions when there were fears about the spread of the pandemic in institutions where they were held. This is what we've tracked in about 14 countries. Sorry, that's globally, but we've also seen that about 14 countries had introduced virtual courts and online trainings and different procedures that can now take place online. And we are confident and hope that these are procedures that will stay and remain also after the COVID. So UNICEF is about to launch a new agenda around justice for children, which is called the Reimagining Justice for Children agenda. And it has 6 policy asks, and these are all kind of contributing also to the achievement of the SDGs. It's about every child being, knowing and claiming their rights, about legal rights awareness around children. It's about children being able to access free legal aid, representation, and services. That every child in conflict with the law can be diverted through different programs. That children are protected from detention through non-custodial measures, therapeutic programs, and so on. That child survivors of violence against children receives justice. That children can access alternative dispute resolutions mechanisms and child-friendly courts. So I think if you look at these kind of 6 policy asks, we can see that Kenya has already made progress on many of them. There's been a lot of work around dispute resolution mechanism, and I'm sure my colleague Tomika will speak more about that. We know that the children's bill will, if adopted, be raising the age of criminal responsibility in Kenya, which is currently set at 8, which really is one of the lowest in the world. So that is really a key policy ask and important change and law reform in Kenya that we so urgently need. In Kenya, UNICEF has also been supporting the NCAJ Special Task Force on Children's Matters. And currently we are working with them to develop a Justice for Children strategy for Kenya. We think that this will be a really important roadmap for Kenya in order to kind of really make it clear what the priorities are for the government and what UNICEF, other development partners, donors can support. I think we also have a wonderful opportunity in taking forward justice for children in Kenya with the new Chief Justice, Honorable Justice Koome, who really is one of those champions for children in Kenya. What a wonderful opportunity to actually advance on this agenda in Kenya. And full of admiration for your Chief Justice and also for all the other members of the NCAJ task force and the judiciary in Kenya. I mean, when I've been traveling around, I've been really impressed with all the justice actors and their passion and dedication to really try to move the needle for ensuring justice for children. So I think UNICEF is also preparing a new 4-year plan, and Justice for Children will be part of that plan in terms of really trying to see how we can come in, how our mandate and our work can add value for this agenda in Kenya. I think the message is very clear. I mean, you are the future lawyers of Kenya, and you are so much needed. And I think I really hope that this summit has been an inspiration to you to see that where you can contribute with your skills and your knowledge that you're gaining through law school. So whether you whether you enter the corporate field or whether you enter the child protection field or you practice family law, you are needed and to ensure access for justice for all children, if not through your daily work, through pro bono services for children. So really excited for this event and hope to that you will be the future champions for children and child protection, justice for children in Kenya. Thank you very much.
Are global issues and do affect us on an... Okay. Okay. So they do affect us on an international scale. So I do like the fact that we've been able to hear somebody who deals with it on a much larger scale than any of us do as of yet. But I do hope that we'll be propelled to those heights and be able to collaborate with her in the future. Next, I would like to welcome the head of the Department of Justice of the US Embassy, Ms. Tomika Patterson, to speak.
Let's try that again. Hamjambo. It is so good to be here with each and every one of you. As I've already been introduced, my name is Tomika Patterson. I am a federal prosecutor from the United States. I work for the US Department of Justice, and I am proud to head the US Department of Justice office here at the US Embassy in Nairobi. It is the largest US Department of Justice office in Africa. We currently have 3 resident legal advisors who cover various different areas. But I'm here today in my capacity as the resident legal advisor who covers rule of law issues here in Kenya. And one of the areas that I focus on heavily is juvenile justice. It is a pleasure and an honor over the last 3 years since I've been here. And since 2016, the US Department of Justice has worked hand in hand with the NCAJ's Special Task Force on Children Matters. And I want to just start by recognizing the amazing collaboration between the NCAJ Special Task Force and Strathmore University for the Child Justice Summit. This is a very unique opportunity that has been crafted under the leadership of Lady Justice Matheka, and obviously inspired by Chief Justice put on the access to justice for children. So this is a very unique opportunity that each of the law students that you have here today. And I just want to talk briefly about some of the support that USDOJ has been able to accomplish in the juvenile justice arena. And I use juvenile justice because those are some of the terms that we use in the US. But here it's about access to justice for children. So we have been honored to work with the Special Task Force since 2016 on the development of service weeks here in Kenya. Service weeks were opportunities to identify cases involving children, whether they were children in conflict with the law or children who were in contact with the law, the child victims, the child witnesses, and identifying those cases to try to get them through the system as quickly as possible. And part of that service week was building capacity amongst the various court user committees on the various topics that are needed in order to resolve those cases. And we have worked hand in hand on capacity building across multiple CUCs across the country, including the 2 exclusive children courts that exist here in Kenya. In addition to the service weeks, we've also worked closely with the NCAJ to support institutional visits, going to children's homes, rescue centers, rehabilitation centers, to understand the realities of children who are in the system. And that information is extremely important to be able to really tailor the way in which your systems and structures are operated so that you can maximize opportunities to get those children through the system as quickly as possible. We've also had the honor and pleasure of working very closely with the various exclusive children's courts to support open days, opportunities to engage directly with the community as it relates to children matters. And I do want to recognize also Monica with UNICEF. We have partnered with them in order to provide training for all DCS children officers in the country on various topics that would better able children officers to support children in the system. We did 2 phases of trainings where we focused on active case management, bail and bond, and 2 topics that you're going to be learning about today, diversion and plea bargaining. And I want to thank the director of the Department of Children's Services, Noah Sanganye, who recognized the importance of that training. And I also want to recognize the assistant director, Ann Thiongo, of DCS, who really headed and spearheaded that secretariat. Every children's officer in this country is now well equipped and ready to pursue all efforts to address issues involving children and using those 4 techniques that we train them on. And we are looking forward to further engagement in that arena. In addition, we've been able to support the National Service Month that happens every November, where there is a focus by the court system on children cases. You may be here today at the Child Justice Summit, but I actually challenge each of the law students here, when you start your Wakili wa Watoto Club, think about the upcoming Service Month. What can you do as a club to support those efforts? So USDOJ has been a proud supporter of the National Service Month. We've already started some engagements with the NCAJ Special Task Force on how we can support for this year. But I challenge each of you to think about that as your clubs become developed. So why is the U.S. Department of Justice here at the Child Justice Summit? You have to be asking yourself, you're from the U.S. Why is this so important to you? Well, like I said, one of my focus areas here in Kenya is focused on children. And that's because a Kenyan child is everyone's child. Everything that happens in one country impacts another. Boundaries are not as fluid, as solid as they were in the past. And a child today can grow up to be a leader, someone who's going to impact the world. And I always think about that when I think about President Barack Obama. The son of Kenya became the president of the United States. Every Kenyan child is everyone's child. And that's why we are here in Kenya to support all across the criminal justice sector to help improve access to justice for children so that children are given a second chance to rehabilitate, to become members of society, to become future leaders. And each and every one of the students that are here today, you are and were a Kenyan child. You are the future of Kenya. And so always remember that as you continue to go through your law school classes, as you are thinking about the future, always remember where you came from so that that can inspire you to where you are going. What I'm excited about for you today is the fact that you will get an opportunity to learn about both diversion and plea bargaining. I think these are 2 really important and critical tools in the fight for children's rights. We know that every child makes a mistake. How many of us have made a mistake in our life? Okay, every hand should be raised here and virtually online, right? I remember being young and being a little bit foolish and stealing some candy from the store and thinking, oh, it's just a penny, it's just a shilling. But those little opportunities can build up for a child. If they're in the wrong situation at the wrong time, the police officer notices that child who steals or notices that child who hits another child. Suddenly, they find themselves in the system. So it's critically important that we always recognize that a child is a human being who makes mistakes. The wonderful thing about being a child is that you can grow, you can learn, you can become better. And our criminal justice system has to be one that recognizes those possibilities. And that's where I think diversion and plea bargaining gives children a second chance. When they have gone down the wrong path, the opportunity for a prosecutor, a police officer, or the court to make that choice to give that child a second chance. Or maybe it's one of those situations where the offense is just a little bit too serious and the child has to go through the system. But why put that child through the full trial process? Find a way to get that child through that system so that they can utilize the sentence that the court imposes to return them to society. That is the benefit of plea bargaining. Those two tools Kenya really is leading on. And you will hear from Prosecutor Linda Ndabiri today. She's going to lead you on sensitizing you on plea bargaining and diversion and how that really does help. These tools help children to get through the system. And like I said, Kenya really is leading on these issues. Kenya was the first country to adopt plea bargaining. And then other countries across Africa started following Kenya's lead, whether it was Tanzania, who modeled their plea bargaining laws on Kenya, Uganda that adopted theirs following Kenya, and even in West Africa, Ghana is actually adopting a plea bargaining scheme that's based on Kenya's rules. So Kenya is a shining beacon here in Africa and in East Africa when it comes to plea bargaining. And through wonderful work that UNICEF has done, there are about 10 countries in Eastern and Southern Africa that are utilizing diversion programs of all types in order to give children a second chance. And Kenya is one of those countries that is really trying to make opportunities available for kids. And I think that you really should be extremely proud of your country and where it is putting its priorities when it comes to children. Now, I want to just end with a message just to the law students. Like I said, I'm a federal prosecutor from the US. I'm a lawyer, just like all of you are striving to be. And I want to just give you a couple of pieces of advice as you continue through your law school journey. First and foremost, I want you to challenge yourself. The wonderful thing about law school is it gets you to open your mind, to expand the way you think about the world. And it's extremely important that you take advantage of the safe spaces that you are in right now to figure out how you can make a difference in the world. Challenge yourself every day to think about what you can do to make your community better. But when you are challenging yourself, I also want to encourage you to think big. Every single change that happens in this world happens because someone had an idea and they ran with it. It could have been a small idea. It could have been a huge concept. But when they came up with that concept, they weren't thinking about how it would impact them or the difficulties that it would incur on their lives. They were always thinking about what's the difference I can make. And I want to encourage you to always think big. Have big ideas. Run with them. Do not allow your fear to hold you back. The one thing that I loved about law school is that I had someone to my right and someone to my left who knew exactly what I was going through. The difficulties of getting ready for class, being worried about that professor who's going to call on you. Am I going to pass that exam? But they were also at that point in their lives where they could explore and they can think and they can be creative. So utilize each other. Look to your right and look to your left when you are trying to think big. And the wonderful thing about your universities is you have professors and you have deans who believe in you, who are striving to make sure that you are your best. Utilize all your resources that are available to you so that every idea can then become a reality. But the final piece of advice that I want to give you is the importance of reaching back. We're here talking about issues about children, access to justice for children, fighting for children's rights. Always think back to when you were a child and making sure you are reaching back to pull up other children so that they have the same opportunities as you. Remember yesterday when Chief Justice Comey said that if the circumstances had changed for her, she wasn't sure if she would have become Chief Justice, right? So always think about that child that's in your community who's struggling. Can you reach back in some way? One of the highlights, the most important things that I've done as a prosecutor has nothing to do with the cases. It has nothing to do with the crimes that are happening in communities, had nothing to do with my job as a prosecutor. It had everything to do with me just being an attorney and reaching back out to children, whether it's law students that I taught, whether it was high school students that I engaged with for mock trial or civic education. And more importantly, it's those children who found themselves in the system that I had the unique opportunity for 11 years to divert from the system. I did that not in my capacity as a prosecutor. I did that in my capacity as a citizen of the city of Philadelphia. And I remember every child that I worked with, every child who came before my panel saying, we did something wrong and we need a second chance. That diversion program that I participated in for over 10 years was one of the most important and pivotal experiences of my life. Not because I was a lawyer, but because I was a citizen of the city that I lived in. And I cared enough about somebody else's child to know I could make a difference. And now, as a mother of 2 7-year-olds, I know that I want to have individuals like each of you law students that you can serve as a role model to them. So reach back, pull other children up to join you in this wonderful profession that you will enter into in the next couple of years. So with those remarks, I just want to congratulate each of you for participating in the Child Justice Summit. I look forward to hearing about the successes of your Wakili wa Watoto clubs, an opportunity, I hope, to work with your clubs in the future. I wish you the best for the final day of the Child Justice Summit and your opportunity to engage, and I mean really engage with all of the panelists. I encourage you to go up to all the panelists that you see today. Don't just sit in your chairs and listen to them or sit back and ask questions, but go up to them, get their cards, follow up with them in the future, use them as your resources. Everyone who's here today or online who will be speaking with you, you are important to them. This is important to them, and they want to help you as you move forward with your future. I want to just say early congratulations to the winners of the Moot competition that are going to be announced later on today. And I look forward to being here for part of the day to see the fruitful engagements that you will endeavor down. Thank you so much. And I look forward to the rest of today's program.
Thank you for that. We have a saying here in Kenya that it takes a village to raise a child, and in this case, it takes a global village. So next, I would like to welcome Ms. Doris Githua, who shall be representing Ms. Zainab Hussein as the Principal Secretary of the State Department of Correctional Services, who shall be joining us online to speak.
Good morning, everyone. I believe you can hear me. Thank you for this opportunity to address this summit. I'm Doris Githua, Deputy Chief State Counsel and Head of Legal in the State Department. I'll be making the presentation on behalf of my PS, Madam Zainab Hussein, who has sent her greetings, and I'll read her talking points as they are. Salutations. The Honorable Chief Justice, Honorable Lady Chief Justice Martha Koome, NCAJ Special Task Force on Children Matters, distinguished guests, lecturers from Strathmore University, students, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to take this opportunity on behalf of the State Department for Correctional Services to address you in this important summit on child justice. The State Department is an active member of the NCAJ in realization of its objectives and reforms for proper administration of justice. I reckon that children are the future of any successful nation. The investment in a country becomes meaningful if children are well prepared to take on the future leadership and sustainable development. I therefore applaud the organizers of this summit for the forum to dialogue about child justice. Let me say that the State Department for Correctional Services is a significant player in the child justice system. It houses the Kenya Prison Services and the Probation and Aftercare Services, which are the two technical institutions charged with the responsibility of handling child offenders in the justice system. The State Department takes care of child offenders at 3 Boston institutions, 6 probation hostels, and 1 youth correctional center. The children who are on supervised non-custodial sentences, which include probation orders and community service orders, are placed under the care of probation and aftercare services. Safeguarding the rights and welfare of these children is therefore paramount in their best interest in the process of rehabilitation and reintegration. It is, however, of great concern that many of the players in the justice system do not fully decipher the integral role of rehabilitation, leading to recycling of criminals in the system. For instance, when sentences are meted, it is usually for punishment rather than reform. Lawyers, on the other hand, get bogged down with winning of cases and not so much on the most appropriate and important measure that would be to transform the offender and restore the victim. I wish to aver that when it comes to children, the best interest of the child principle should be a paramount consideration. Measures for rehabilitation should be carefully thought out and a priority accorded to non-custodial sentences as opposed to incarceration of these children. This requires the attention of all players in the justice system. I call you on, as young lawyers preparing to enter into the legal practice, to be keen to understand the process of rehabilitation and reintegration, which requires concerted efforts of all players. In so doing, your knowledge will benefit the children, more so as you join the judiciary, the prosecution, or the correctional service, by ensuring only the more deserving children are sent to holding institutions, and not just for punishment, but prioritizing non-custodial measures which are less stigmatizing and accord the children the opportunity to grow. You will also deal with protection of child victims and to help them access the psychological support, making the rehabilitation and reintegration process effective. I look forward to working with you in the field of correctional services as you gain interest in the child justice system. I applaud the Chief Justice, Honorable Lady Justice Martha Koome, for her dedicated leadership to strengthening the child justice system in Kenya, and confirm the support of the Department of Correctional Services in this noble journey. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Hussein. I would just like to remind everyone about the third panel session. You are requested to write your questions on a sheet of paper and then hand them to the ushers. We shall be moving into the next panel session. The topic for the next panel session is current developments and emerging issues in the child justice system. We shall first start with a presentation by the Honorable Magistrate, Ms. Jackie Kibosia, who shall be giving us a short presentation and shall be joined by Catherine Andele. Yes, so please, let's welcome Ms. Jackie Kibosia to give her presentation. We'll just take a few minutes.
Good morning. Again, my name is Jackie Kibosia, magistrate interested in child justice, as I said. As we set up, allow me to demonstrate to you child inclusivity. In all our meetings, especially the Children Court Users Committee, we usually invite a child to come and speak to us. So allow me to introduce Caroline Andele. She's one of the children we are mentoring, believe you me, she's barely 14. So let her come and give her speech as they set us up. My presentation, I think, is around 10 minutes. So as they set up, because I'm not seeing it, let's not waste a lot of time. Let's allow her to just come and speak to us about what children think about the justice system. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Caroline Jackie Andele. Thank you for having me in this forum today. First off, I wish to congratulate Honorable Lady Justice Martha Koome for her appointment as the Chief Justice of Kenya. We are super proud of her. I wish to extend my gratitude to the National Council of Administration of Justice, Special Task Force on Children's Matters for the good work you have done throughout the years. To all the justice actors present, the right of the child as special rights. Under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Kenya Constitution envisions a Kenya where children's rights are protected. The best interest of the child should be considered in all decisions. The voice of the child ought to be heard in all spheres, including matters justice. I would like to leave you with this quote by Nelson Mandela. There can be no greater gift than that of giving one's time and energy to help others without expecting anything in return. Asanteni.
Sorry. Yeah, yeah, I'm told the presentation is not yet ready. So maybe I can just speak from on top of my head. Psychosocial support for children is what I found lacking in the justice system. 5 years ago, we sat down with a group of therapists on how do we help children, how do we get into the mind of children. They appear before us, but we need to understand what they think. And you realize that children they have so many things that they think about, but we never quite understand. If you look at Andele there, at her age, she's already talking about Article 53. So you can imagine, give and take, by the time she joins Strathmore Law School in first year, she already understands, she has an idea about the Constitution. So we start that early. You might think that children don't know much, but you're able to mold that child and they get to understand things very fast. Now, the reason why I've displayed these toys is because when I told you I joined judiciary, I decided I will use my skills as an art and play therapy enthusiast. I want to say that because then there's a process before you become a therapist. First, I had to undergo the 40-hour training, and I also had to sit down with a few counselors, child therapists, to understand the process. And that is how I prepared to get into judiciary. That first, when I was asked, why are you here? You see those interview questions? I said, I have seen a gap in child justice. And I have tried over the years to try and fill that gap. But unfortunately, you have to play the roles of both magistrate, therapist, especially in the protection and care files. We have two categories, as I said yesterday. The trial court is neutral. It doesn't move towards the child. It sits in the middle. The PNC court is now the Article 53 court because the best interest principle is captured at that level. So what I do in the PNC court is, for instance, have a toy like this. This toy has helped us throughout our therapy sessions. She's called Sophie. So Sophie, what we do, we display to the child in our room which toy they want to play with, because their language is play. So we observe which toy the child will go for. There's one boy who came and this is what they picked. So already that tells you something. They did not even pick this. They picked. So I asked, and why are you picking this? He said, I want to douche daddy. So I said, okay, fine, let's douche daddy together. So we douched. Then eventually I realized daddy was the problem. I would not have done that if I didn't present a variety of toys. I don't know if you've gotten until there. So another one, we brought Sophie on the table. Another one picked Sophie, a boy. And the first thing they did to Sophie is they peeped at Sophie. What does that tell you? That child is already sexualized, yeah? Because why wouldn't you look at the hair, the face? Why are you going to look at other things so you also observe, then you realize this child has been exposed to some element, some sexual content. And you see now, what would you start? Did you even imagine that there was something underneath? But this boy already is curious and wants to check and even remove it. So already I would write in my notes that this child, there's something around his sexuality. Then at times they'll tell you, I'm in pain, and they can't describe the pain. So you'd give them the chart and they show you where the pain is. And majority of those children will point towards the chest area on the left. That means the heart is in pain. So how would I know that if I just spoke with the child without giving them something to explain, to demonstrate what they're feeling? So already, have you seen, we already have a whole story about these children. Just by what they pick, some of them, especially the girls, will go for the colors. I don't know why boys don't like colors. Maybe because most of the time they're colorblind. So the girls would go for colors and start drawing things. And you also want to know what they draw. So I will demonstrate that now that my drawing is there. Then there was this last boy, again, who, there are different cars. I just brought this as a sample, but this one chose a police car. So it means that home has interacted with the police. You see this siren? For them, already, it shows you that there was a police officer somewhere with a car, and they would specifically go for this toy. Then you want to know who was arrested. So they would tell you it's daddy who was arrested. So, and if they combine this, and this is the experience some police shooting. And they're projecting it. I don't know if you understand. So you can only serve that child after you understand their story. I always wonder, how do you talk about children, make decisions about them without understanding their mind? You just have to understand what they think about. You might think this is the best interest, but they will tell you other things in the way they play. This is now the latest sensation. It's called a pop-it. I don't know if you know it. You've seen it everywhere these days. So we also have to upgrade our play game. So this one, you remember the bubble wraps when you were small, you used to, you remember the satisfaction you'd get in pressing those. Even as adults, we still feel that satisfaction. You just want to. So now, because we finished all our bubble wrap, somebody came up with this. So it's a bubble wrap. So it pops. It's called a pop-it. I know you didn't know this. Now, let's go to the presentation. I still can't see it. It's too small. So we have psychology meets the law as the topic. This was a project done by Makadara Law Courts through Justice Through the Eyes of the Child. You already know the law, so you will not go there much. Let's move to the next slide. Now, the slides are, I think, okay, we have the categories of children. We have children in conflict, children in contact. The children in conflict, number one, what they need is legal representation. Before you even go to psychosocial support, they need to be guided on which plea to take. They need to be guided whether we are doing plea bargaining, we are doing diversion, before you even look at the psychosocial issues, because that comes later. So the second part is psychosocial support. You realize that children who are in conflict with the law were once in contact with the law. They had issues. They were children in need of care and protection. To make them graduate to being children in conflict, because they are doing something called projection. They're projecting something. We will explain what projection is all about. The child witnesses fall under contact. They could be in civil, especially for divorce and separation and custody. We also have the criminal aspect where they appear as witnesses, either direct witnesses or witnesses children who witnessed violence, like now these ones. And I want to mention that this doesn't happen in the trial court. So the trial court only takes the counselor's report. It doesn't get involved in counseling. So it's the counselor who should file a report to the trial court. But the P&C court will now do all this, has all the time to do this, because you need to place the child and help them through the processes. So psychosocial support is what is awarded to the children in contact. And at times, even legal representation. We have seen advocates who just volunteer to watch brief to ensure the files come to court in time. They assist the prosecution. So that's also another opportunity that has not been explored. We don't have advocates watching brief. And they assist because they have the right of audience. They'll tell you something that was left out by the prosecutor. So at times we for complicated cases, especially for children with neurodiversity, we don't call them mental challenges. We call them children with neurodiversity. So that advocate would be placed to bring a report to say, this is an autistic child. The prosecution may not have the time to interact with the child. So we'll go straight. Maybe.
Where's your laptop? Where's your bag? Sorry. Was that right? Okay. The next slide is just expand a bit.
Yeah, that's much better. Yeah.
All right.
Just go to the next one. So I'm really trying to simplify these processes because lawyers don't want to do accounts, they don't want to do psychology, they just want to stick to the law. But because the law has met psychology, then you will go into a psychology class. This should take you 40 hours, but I've condensed it into 10 minutes. So we have something called the Jean Piaget model. This is a Swiss psychologist who tried to demystify the cognitive behavior of children. And you see, there is something called the sensorimotor stage. That is the time when a child learns to hold something. That is 0 to 2 years. They can't figure out much. And every adult is a giant in their lives because they are down here and you're up there. So we encourage that you come to their level. You don't stand when you're talking to a 2-year-old. We encourage you to sit or squat. That way, they don't see you as a huge giant because that is what their minds perceive you as. And especially for the men, they look at the beard and they can't even figure out why you have a beard. Because all they're used to is their mother and the breastfeeding, and they would see mom has nothing here. But now this man walks with a very loud voice, very loud. Your voices are very loud to them. And that is where we are saying, even in the womb, start talking to them so that they get used to your loud voice. Because you appear in the house and they really get scared. That voice alone. The whole day they've had a very small, kuchi kuchi, baby. But now this man just comes and gives orders. And they are wondering, who is this who comes at night when I'm about to sleep? So we have now the next stage. I don't know if you're able to see it. This is the pre-operational. The child begins to represent the world symbolically. Are you seeing the symbols? They can't figure out why the trees are moving. If any of you travel with a 7-year-old and they ask you, why are the trees moving? They can't imagine it's the car that is moving. They'll tell you these trees keep moving. Their world cannot understand a lot of things at that stage. Then we have the next stage, which is now concrete. The operational stage, the child learns rules. The teacher is always right. I don't know if you have reached that point where you talk to an 8-year-old and they tell you, teacher did not say that. They are now, even if you're the mother, they would still tell you, no, teacher didn't say that. You see, now the conversations begin to change. They're now rule-centered. They have more structure in their lives. Then, of course, now you have the last stage there, 12 to adulthood. At this stage, they are beginning to figure out. Like from now 12 years, I can tell you, somebody like Caroline here already knows. She is already exposed to child justice and she'll tell you, I don't think this is what I want. They're already figuring out their future. They're already imagining themselves as their profession. Some of you at 12 years already knew what you wanted. And majority wanted to be a teacher. I don't know why. But I think that is the only person that you looked up to at that stage until you realize that the teacher has been in school since when they were 5. Somebody said that teachers are the only professions, the only professionals who've been at school since they were 5 years, and until they are 60, they're still in the same environment. So you discover, no, this is a bit boring. I need to move to the next level. So at this stage, they start rationalizing issues. Remember, Paul yesterday could remember things and says when mama was sick is when she had the news. he's now rationalizing issues. And it would have been worse for Paul. You remember Paul yesterday? It would have been worse for him if it happened when he was 6. You will now understand why 6 is a very crucial age. But at 13, he's figuring out that I have to be a man, fight for myself, sleep on this floor, cold floor. I will make it. They're beginning to man up at that stage. But as a 6-year-old, they would not even figure out what is happening at home. So that is just the developmental stages. Then let us look at the brain, the stages of development. The survival brain, it is what the survival, you'll see the diagram just after that, is what you use for breathing, blood flow, and digestion. Have you realized when you are in serious trouble, why do you have butterflies in your stomach? It's because the digestive system, you have now frozen. Every part of the brain has shut down apart from the survival part. That is why you have butterflies and you're freezing, because the survival, every other part is not integral during intense situations. So there is the emotional brain. Now, this is what is affected by the justice system at most, the emotional part of the brain. You see, it controls your happiness, your feeling of safety, the connectivity, your bonding. That is the part that appreciates love. If somebody just gives you a gift, why do you feel so attached to them after they've given you a gift? It's because the emotional part of the brain feels that you have touched it. And that is why at times when you're told, think with your heart, there is still a heart in the middle here that feels for you and transmits to the heart. So then we have the smart brain. This one fully develops at age 25. So if you're below 25 here, you still need to be guided. Because the frontal cortex is the last to develop at the age of 25. That is why you're still being called, what time are you reaching home? It's because instinctively, your parents think that you're not there yet. So when at 23 years, you want to say, I want to get married, they look at you and you're like, no. Have you seen, the people who are below 25 are not here, yeah? We are all above 25. Also, I'm speaking to the right audience. So you will still need to guide you until you're 25. That is when you finished your undergrad and now you're ready to make serious decisions. Yes, that one we cannot argue about. I know you want to become lawyers about, but that one is scientifically proven. You need to be guided. So this one is the executive functioning of the brain. Problem solving, decision making, what do I want to be? Do I want to go to the bench? You're even now gauging, is this magistrate making sense? You're there. It's this part that thinks for you there. Are you seeing now your brain? See where the emotional brain is. It's right in the middle. It develops from survival, then it moves to emotional. By 6 years, the emotional brain is now very crucial because do you remember things that happened when you're 6 years? It's like yesterday, it's really traumatic events. And for the generation that we grew up being pinched, maybe this generation is not that generation where there was this thing in the house called a sleeper. That weapon of character development. That weapon. And I don't know why sleeper, but they reached out for the sleeper. So you can imagine the effect. Right now, some people, I talked to someone who says, I hate wearing slippers. I'd rather even walk on something else, but not a slipper, because it reminds me of the beating, even on the head. Actually, they would even aim at your head. Some of you didn't grow like that. So those traumatic events are still here with us. Or you guys are not the slipper generation. You as the mwiko. No. The belt, yeah? So it graduated from the slipper. So you see the survival brain? That is the survival one. And I told you everything else shuts down. When you're in a state of maybe very sick, you'd not even think. You'd not even feel anything. You become numb because everything else has shut for survival. So children who come to the justice system are on survival mode. They can't think, they can't reason, They are now on survival, constantly on survival. As they get into that traffic jam, you're coming from the juvie prison to go to court, they're not even thinking about anything else. It's the breathing, it's the digestive system that is now operationalizing in itself. I mean, that is the only part that is functioning. So you can imagine what the justice system does to the smart brain, the emotional brain. It shuts those two completely. A research was done. This is a brain scan of a 3-year-old boy. The normal, are you seeing the normal? Look at the extreme neglect case. Are you seeing the brain is smaller? So trauma has an effect on brain development. So our justice system needs to be very sensitive. When you see a 3-year-old child in court, that is how the brain looks like if they've gone through extreme neglect. So trauma is real. It affects the brain and especially the emotional part of the brain. Now, what is art and play therapy? The Sexual Offences Act, somebody has asked, do you have a legal basis? Yes, I do. Why we do this is because the PRC form is a part for psychological psychosocial assessment, psychological assessment. The PRC form is founded by, it was started in 2006 by virtue of it being enacted. And we thank the drafters because they were very futuristic. If you look at part B on psychological assessment, you find a part that says you may use toys and you may use art. It is there in the law. So I didn't just carry things from wherever I was. I brought them because there's a legal basis for art and play therapy. So why art and play therapy? Therapeutic jurisprudence intervention. We have reached a point where we are now exploring something called TJ, therapeutic jurisprudence, where we don't just leave the client there. We've taken so much from them. The police have interviewed them, the ODPP. Imagine the process, the justice system. So we are now saying, can we offer some psychosocial support? There's the Victim Protection Act that has it, that the court may actually order for psychosocial assessment and even for therapy. So according to the Sexual Offences Act, counseling is been recognized as part of and parcel of treatment. So yes, and the Honorable Chief Justice has just launched her vision for judiciary, and it's called the Social Transformation Through Access to Justice. So how do we transform socially if we leave the children unattended, especially on the cognitive part of their brains? Another, number 2, cognitive behavioral therapy. You see, the cognitive part of the brain is the middle brain, the part that feels. The part that when you touch a dog, it starts wagging its tail. It just wags its tail, and it's the cognitive part of the brain that is responding to the touch. So cognitive behavioral therapy is what we use, especially for play therapy, because we try to make sense for the child. It helps the child to put things into perspective. If they've gone through a traumatic event, you must bring something called the hero effect. You say, okay, fine. Now that you've gone through this traumatic effect, what other things have you, like a child who has gone through maybe a violent father, you'd ask them, let's look at the good things that daddy has done. Like, oh yeah, then they start now lightening up. He used to buy toys, so now we focus on the positive side of the trauma. I don't know if that makes sense. And even if at times it's so difficult to find, but we must find something. Has daddy ever taken you to a movie? Has he ever bought you a toy? You see, now they're moving from 0 to becoming, oh yeah, he has done. So what are you going to do about it? I will douche him. They're now the hero in the story. They're able to possess the gun to shoot. Not physically shooting, but in their minds, are you saying that is a hero story for them? So when I see parents buying these guns and they start doing water fights, they're doing it for the wrong thing. This is a therapeutic toy. It's not for water fights. It helps children to become the hero in their story. They would even tell you, when I grow up, I want to be a police officer and this will be my car. Then I'll put daddy here and handcuff him. And that is his hero story. And you must appreciate it because he's the hero now in the story. He's a police officer who's coming to arrest daddy. So you allow them to tell their stories. You allow them to move from zero stage to hero stage. Then it heals the emotional part of the brain. When they act out, it helps them to unpack. They're able to unpack what the brain is going through. And also we are able to detect something called neurodiversity. There's something called mental age. There's a time I was handling a child. She was 13 years. And by then she was expectant. She was expecting the father's child. So we had to figure out how to unpack this child. And while I was talking to this child and helping them through the process in the PNC file, there is something we discovered that she could not write at age 13. She could not even do basic functions for herself, like she had to move the pen from the table. So then we discovered that she's been autistic and it was never discovered. So because of this and the art, we're able to detect neurodiversity. As I told you, we don't call them mental illness. We don't call it, there's those things we usually call it. It's just neurodiversity for children. Because then when you say you have a mental illness to a child, what are you doing to the middle part? You're shrinking it because then it becomes a label. So you don't want to label them. So this is very quick. For children, the first thing you do, you don't just ask them, what is your name? What brings you here? You must rapport build. What is your name? Where is this place? And this is where now it takes around 15 minutes to make them comfortable. And it must be in a very child-friendly environment, not a place where there is a police officer with uniform. Actually, we're even saying now, for children matters, the police officers should not be having uniform. They should dress down. And so that we don't get to know that this is an officer. The child cannot talk when they see a police officer, and especially if they have a gun. Even you right now, when you're stopped by a police officer, you go to freeze mode. Eh? You go to survival mode very fast. So you can imagine a child who sees an officer. So you trigger the episodic memory. When did this start happening? When did daddy start touching you inappropriately? Or when did mom start doing this? So you must trigger the episodic memory. Let them go back to 6 years and tell you their story if they're above 6. Then transition to the substantive issues because it's a forensic interview tool. You need evidence, especially for ODPP. So transition to the substantive issues, age, penetration, especially for sexual offenses. Then elicit information that was left out because you're presenting this case in court. So you have to look for the things that will support their case. Then closure. You must thank them and tell them now the next process, but do not promise anything. Don't tell them, daddy will be arrested. What if the magistrate acquits that child, the father? So you don't promise anything at that stage. Just ask open-ended questions. Let them tell their story. So we have storytelling. They'll tell you their stories, role-playing. I like the doctor role play because they will tell you, they'll put on the stethoscope and show you, they'll treat you. So they mirror their treatment. So they will touch their heart. So you want to know, are you touching my heart because I have a chest pain? So then you'll ask them, why are you putting that stethoscope here on my heart? He said, because your heart is paining. So you see now, they will mirror where the pain is through being a doctor. So you ask them to treat you. So when they treat you, they are treating the parts of themselves that are in pain. And mostly they will treat the chest. So you want to know, are you treating the chest because you saw a doctor do it or because your chest is pain? And chest pain reflects trauma and emotional pain. So there is animal aided. I think my time is up. Animal aided. And then there is water and sand therapy. For sand therapy, we use it for grief, especially during COVID. Many families were affected by COVID. They lost loved ones. So for sand therapy, they would bury their loved ones. So that you allow them to do it. So they will use the sand and they'll bury the small toys. There we use the small toys because then they're able to get into the sand. So you allow them to grieve. You allow them to bury. You allow them to put flowers. You must take them through the grief process. Now, this is a sample drawing. Are you seeing this home? The child is the one in red. Are you seeing there is something in red, a black image, then they've cancelled with something red? So you can imagine that child is not even visible in that home. Then there is a baby who is neglected. That is maybe the kid brother. And look at the father on the extreme right. He has no hands. Are you seeing it? No hands is a sign of love. And you see that father doesn't have hands? And look at the father's eyes. It means he looks at you with very stern eyes and he has a big mouth. He just abuses you, you know? And the mother has no what? Has no mouth. It means she has no say in that home. And look at the distance between the father and the mother. There's a child in between. So that tells you, and where is this child? Away from the family in a cage. Are you seeing that cage? There's something like a small fence. These are real stories that are told about a chaotic home. And if you're not keen enough, you will not understand that. It's only now that you have a little understanding of what it means. But now you would think it was just something that was drawn, but that is a meaningful drawing, sorry. This child went through therapy. Look at the home now. They even had a dog added to that. They had enough love even to adopt a pet. Are you seeing? And then you see there is sunshine. You see yellow sun. It means what? It's sunny, you know? And there's even a tree that has leaves. Are you seeing? And they're holding each other. You see the hands have now come. They didn't have hands, but after therapy now that home has hands. And the daddy and mommy are together. Are you seeing? Are you seeing on the extreme right? Daddy and mommy? And look at how big that child is in the picture. It means that child has now regained importance. He's almost the same size as daddy. Are you seeing? It's a boy who is almost reaching daddy's level in terms of being aware and being assertive. And then the baby is no longer in the middle. You see, the baby is now on their own now. He has found his space next to mommy. He struggled through. So this will help us to understand whether the child is responding to treatment or not. Now, this is a sample of sexual abuse. So this child would draw a heart, a big heart. I love daddy. You love daddy, yes. Then it reaches a point where we trigger the episodic memory. They start drawing the black around the love hearts. See, when you see black in a child's drawing, that means there is a darkness, yeah? And then they will tell you, I no longer love daddy because he did something. He will not tell you. They will not tell you. Then they will say, I no longer love daddy. Are you seeing the X? So the love is no longer there. But don't forget, there's still some red element behind. They didn't draw another heart. So the heart is now coming out in the lower picture. Are you seeing the heart is no longer black, but it is broken? So because of the therapy, the emotional part of the brain is about to repair that heart. It has moved from dark. It's now a heart with cracks. It's better for it to have cracks than to have the dark around it. So this would tell you their story. And with time, I will tell you for a fact they will get reconciled because of the cognitive behavioral therapy. We bring out some of the good things that daddy may have done, and that heals the relationship. And when they grow up, they want to be like daddy. Even if they did it, it's still okay because he's still daddy and I still love him. Are you seeing how it plays out, especially in sexual offenses? And that's the end. Although this is a short video on how it works, especially in the US, how the justice system has adopted it. I'm told there's no time. It's around, I think, 4 minutes. But I can always send it for you for it to be played later. Children are blank canvases. Each person that touches them is a brush stroke on their lives. So just know that every child you meet, you are holding the brush stroke, and anything you do to them will leave a permanent. It will be permanent and it will trigger the episodic memory. And that is why, have you ever tried to hold a child and they do this? Have you ever seen that effect? They're saying, first, you're a stranger, I don't know you. And number two, you have not invested in my middle, part. So let's invest in the middle part of the brain. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I would just like to.
can play the video. Oh. Oh, that's not me. So due to public demand, the video will be played. Sorry.
Kindly give us a few minutes as we sort out the presentation so that even those of us that are here physically will be able to watch the video. Okay, so we will play the video after the break. So next, I would like to welcome the very able and capable Ms. Christine Jane and Mr. Vianney Sebayiga to moderate the next session. Ms. Christine Jane is a graduate of the Strathmore Law School who currently works with the Strathmore Institute for Family Studies and Ethics, while Mr. Vianney Sebayiga is also a graduate of the Strathmore Law School and is a graduate assistant who helps with the teaching of persons such as myself. Would you like to give them a round of applause as they take over the session?
All protocols observed. Good morning. Good morning once again. So we've had a very wonderful morning session, right? Up to this far, yeah? Okay, so yes, my name is Christine Jane, as it has been introduced. Vianney and I will moderate this session. And next we're going to be talking about current developments and emerging issues in the child justice system. So before I continue, I'd like Vianney to, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Yes. Yes, I want to welcome you to this next session. My name is Vianney Sebayiga, as been introduced by the MC. I'm a graduate assistant at the Strathmore Law School. I'm also a research assistant at the Institute of Family Studies. And Christine and I are part of the organizing committee for the summit. So please join us in this next session. Let us enjoy. I think we've had a therapy session that was enjoyable. I think now we are ready for this session. So the order of the session, I will introduce and request our panelists to come and take their seats. I will call one by one, and then they'll tell us what they do, and then we'll have the Q&A later after they've all talked to us. So I'll go straight in. Our session is the current developments and emerging issues in the child justice system. And we are very delighted to have the registrar of the Mediation Accreditation Committee of the Judiciary, Honorable Moses Wanjala. Please let us join our hands and welcome him. Yes, please. No, he's going to sit. Yes, thank you. You're welcome, Honorable Moses Wanjala. Then we also have Miss Linda Ndambiri from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. Okay. We also have Detective Lawrence Okoth, who is also here to join us. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Detective Okoth is a cybercrime expert with the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, and is a special member of the Kenya Cybersecurity and Forensics Association. You're welcome. Then we also have Dr. Elisabetta Ferreira, who is from the Catholic University of Porto in Portugal. She's joining us online. Let us welcome her.
Hello.
And lastly, we have Professor Julia Sloth Nielsen from the Department of Public Law, University of Western Cape, and is also a professor of children's rights in the developing world, University of Leiden. Let us join our hands and welcome him.
Morning, everybody.
Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence this morning. We are going to follow the order as it is in the program in terms of how they're going to present for us. And so I'm going to start with Honorable Moses Wanjala. You're very welcome. I would like to, as you introduce yourself, please tell us what your career is as a registrar of the Mediation Accreditation Committee at the Judiciary. And then from there, you can proceed with the other questions for you.
Thank you. I want to thank the moderators and my fellow panelists. My name is Moses Wanjala. That is how I preferred to be introduced today. I'm a registrar with the Mediation Accreditation Committee. So the Mediation Accreditation Committee is a committee in the judiciary. I'll briefly talk about it. I'm also a magistrate, but I don't normally like introducing myself as such so much because it obscures my role as a mediation registrar. So I'm a magistrate at Thika Law Courts, but I've been a mediation registrar since the year 2015. Now, for young lawyers, the upcoming lawyers in the room, I know you've been told that as a practitioner in law, your role to go to court is to represent your client. You assume that all cases that reach the court will be heard before a judicial officer and a judgment will be delivered at the end. That is what has been going on for a long period of time. Now, the judiciary realized that that is not the best way to dispense justice. And that's why we have wonderful people right now in the judiciary, like Honorable Kibosia, and you've seen what she's presented. So we are not all about hearing you and passing judgments. And that's why in 2015, the Mediation Accreditation Committee was established by the then Chief Justice. It is a statutory committee within the judiciary established under the Civil Procedure Act, Section 59. That is an amendment that was done in 2012. So the committee was established in 2015. It has representations from various stakeholders. The Law Society of Kenya is represented by 2 slots, the Kenya Bankers Association, the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, and so on. Then as the mediation registrar, I am in charge of the day-to-day activities of that committee. The role of that committee is to accredit mediators for court-annexed mediation. So right now we have accredited 876 mediators since we started our work in 2016. And when we've got the first crop of mediators, we commenced the court-annexed mediation program on 4th of April 2016. Mediation is where litigants that have cases in court are diverted from the normal court proceedings and introduced to a mediator who helps them or assists them to reach an amicable settlement, so that you don't have to bring witnesses, you don't have to proceed with everything until the end where a judgment is given, but you are able to sit with the other side, and with the assistance of a mediator, you can be able to reach an amicable settlement. Once that settlement is reached, it is adopted by the court and enforced as an order of the court. Since 2016, we have referred over 10,000 cases to court-annexed mediation. We have resolved over 6,000 cases, and our settlement rate oscillates between 50 and 60%. Now, quite related to this is that we realize that child justice does not require to go through the rigors of the court processes. So when the program was started at a pilot level, we deliberately targeted the family division of the High Court in Milimani and the commercial division, because we were concerned about the commercial relationships and the family relationships. And I'm happy to report that a majority of the cases that involve children, either directly as parties or as victims, have been resolved through mediation. There is a court in Mombasa called Tononoka that strictly deals with the children matters. And we introduced mediation there around 2018 or 2019. And I'm happy to report that a majority of the cases that involve children, including child support, that go to mediation, we are able to get positive results after mediation. So I think I would want to end there in terms of introduction, because we will be engaging probably on the avenues for you as young lawyers, how you can take part in mediation, and how mediation can then assist to advance child justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, as we engage more, I'm sure the curious questions students have in terms of the role you have, and in mediation, one of the questions would actually tackle as we continue now will be how are students, how can law students be accredited mediators, for instance, if they undertake the training, or do they have to be professionals? It's a question you could tackle even as we go along. Okay, now I mean.
Okay, thank you. I said the role of the Mediation Accreditation Committee is to accredit mediators. So we have standards that we use in accrediting mediators. So the starting point is for you to be trained as a professional mediator. And we require at least a 40-hour training in mediation. That is slightly different from an ADR course, normal course that you take as a law student. So this is a professional training that you undertake for 5 days, 40 hours, 8 hours a day. Then once you have been trained, you apply to the Mediation Accreditation Committee for accreditation as a mediator. There are some requirements. You have to have trained as a mediator. You have to meet integrity level, because we do not want people with integrity issues to be our mediators. And again, there is a requirement that we do not normally enforce, when we started off in 2016, we were insisting that you must have a university degree before you can be accredited as a mediator. But right now, we have people on board who do not have a university degree. Now, as training lawyers, you stand a good chance to be accredited as a mediator. And the requirements, of course, is that I've said you must have trained, you must have some minimum academic requirements, and then you must meet the requirements of Chapter 6 of the Constitution. I would be interested to see most of you apply. Some of you wait until you have been graduated before you apply. But my interest right now is to see you people applying for accreditation right now. You can do so as an individual, you can do so as a group, you can even have mediation clubs at the university and have all your members accredited as mediators. We'll issue the certificate that can act as a good credential to your CV. But of course, when you participate in the program, there is also some compensation that we give to you as a mediator. So yes, you can apply even right now for accreditation once you have trained.
Okay, thank you for that response. Another question would be, so you've mentioned that there have been many success cases for when it comes to solving disputes in relation to children. The question would be, what's the role of children in these mediation cases? Are their voices heard? Are they given a chance to voice out their concerns in mediations, in disputes relating to them?
Thank you. Good question. Now, the way mediation works is that the solution is generated by the parties. It's not the mediator that makes a decision for the parties. So, where the case involves a child, ordinarily you would require, as a mediator, will require that you have a representative to represent that child because of power imbalance. If a child is undertaking a mediation with an adult person on the other side, then you would expect a power imbalance. So if it is a dispute that involves a child and an adult on the other side, then the child must have a representative who is vetted by the court, of course, so that we know that they are there for the best interest of the child, just the same way they represent children in normal court proceedings. Number two, and a majority of the cases that I talked about where children are involved probably at a second level. If you are dealing with a divorce case, and that forms a big part of our cases in the family division, then there are children involved. So, and probably it is a case of child support or child maintenance. So if you allow such a case to go on, you allow the parents to fight who should pay school fees for next term, who should provide medication and so on. And then it takes 3, 4, 5 years down the line, then a child somewhere is suffering. If you eventually write a judgment and probably order that this parent A should provide support and they don't do so, as a court probably they will be arrested and put in civil jail, and the child will even suffer more. So a majority of the cases that we have had breakthrough are not, I wouldn't say that are cases where a child is directly participating as a party to the case, but a case where a child's best interest will be catered for if the disputing parties are helped to resolve their dispute through mediation. So a divorce proceeding, a child support and maintenance case, if it is resolved through mediation, then children's rights are best taken care of somewhere. through that. And our rules require that you resolve the dispute within 60 days. On average, since 2016, we've been resolving disputes within 66 days. So you can imagine if you have a dispute where you are able to resolve it in 66 days rather than 3 years or 5 years down the line, then a child's interests are taken care of. So that is what forms the bulk of the cases that have been resolved through mediation involving children.
All right, thank you very much for that response. A last question for you, Honorable Wanjala, will be, so for most child maintenance and custody cases, for children of tender years, children of tender years generally, they are mainly expected to be with the mother. For instance, if there's a separation or divorce dispute between the parents, and so the child most of the time is supposed to be with the mother, children of tender years. Are there cases where that's not followed? For instance, the father gets to have custody of children in such settings because of extenuating circumstances, because fine, the mother should have the child, but it may not always be in the best interest of the child, in certain cases, or are there such cases to begin with?
Yeah, you're right. In cases of separation and custody of the child, where the parents are separating, you have to look at where the best interest of the child will be best catered for, if the child should remain in the custody of either of the parents. So it's not cast in stone that it has to be the mother or the father. But as you rightly put it, as a mother, ordinarily you stand a better chance in terms of how mothers take care of children, some basic needs that children have, that as a father, you might not really be in a position to provide. As a court, probably there are cases, I'm not aware of one of my head right now, where a court has had to give custody to the father, not the mother, but they are there. Probably they will be preceded by a report from the children officer or the probation officer, having gone to the ground and assessed where the best interests of the child will be taken care of. If it is a mother that does not even have a place to stay, that engages in a business that will not help the growth of the child well, and a report is filed in court that shows that the best interest of the child will best be taken care of when they remain in the custody of the father rather than the mother, then the court will be inclined to give such an order. And we review those orders from time to time to see that those interests are being taken care of. Now, the goodness with mediation is that all those issues will be discussed during the mediation session. And at the end of the day, the report has to come, the settlement agreement has to come to court for adoption. So the court will look into it and confirm that it really takes care of the best interest of the child. The other attribute of mediation is that enforcement is very easy, because this is the parties' own agreement. So if I offer that you will remain with the custody of the child, I'll be providing ABCD, and you also agree that I will do this and this, we will be able to access shall be done in this manner or that. And then that is your own agreement, then it will be easy to enforce it. Because since we started in 2016, we have never had a situation where somebody has had to come to court to seek to enforce a settlement agreement, because they basically have agreed themselves. But where a court gives an order, that's where we normally have, the in the judiciary, we always say that children cases never end. So at the opening of the term, you will see most of those cases, most of that court very active. A certain parent has not released the children to go back to school. So and so has not paid school fees and so on. But in mediation, it is their own solution, and therefore they are willing to enforce it. But it does happen even in court. Orders are given that custody remains with the father and not with the mother.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for the responses. So now we'll move to Linda Ndambiri. She's a representative from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And so going forward to Linda, kindly tell us what you do and your role in the Office of the ODPP before we proceed to the questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much to who are participating in this summit. So my names are Linda Ndambiri from the Office of the Director Public Prosecution. I work within the Children Division and I'm a prosecutor at the Children's Court. So we do a lot when it comes to children. As a ODPP, we note that the only constant in life is change. And I think hearing the experiences of some of he was called, I think, Paul or Patrick yesterday. And I think it was a harrowing experience, isn't it? I think we can all agree that. But as I've said, the only constant in life is change. And as an office, we have tried to put up a couple of strategic interventions to ensure that our children are at the forefront of what we do. As we said yesterday, these are children, they're our present, they're our future. And it will determine the course of the country, isn't it, if we don't take care of them. So one of the strategic intervention has been the formulation of the Children Division, which I'm a part of. And the Children Division actually leads the administrative and maybe strategic focus when it comes to children. And one of our members is here, Ms. Miri Wangele. Yes, she's also a prosecutor doing also children issues. So when it comes also to what we've done as the division, one of the things we decided to do is that, you cannot just have a center of power. It has to be devolved. And one of the interventions we've done is the Child Justice Unit, which compromises of prosecutors in all sub-county levels within the nation, so that there's a person whose sole mandate, if a child's issue comes up, they're the first point of contact within the ODPP. And this has really helped because you find that sometimes a child is rescued and we said we work as a chain and you might need to know who the prosecutor will be so that you can make applications through the prosecutor and all that. So the Child Justice Unit has come in handy. And some of the other things we've actually done as an office is, number one, coming up with the decision to charge guidelines. Now, one of the things I heard from Paul was that he was innocent, isn't it? That's what he said, that he was innocent, but he was framed up. That's what he said. That was around 203. So one of the things we've come up with is the decision to charge guidelines. So here, this guides all prosecutors in the country. Before I make a decision to take you to court, there has to be sufficiency of evidence and other guidelines that we have to take into focus before we take children, and especially children, to court. We are ministers of justice. We are not, kitambo vioja mahakamani. See, I don't know whether you saw vioja mahakamani. Maybe I'm jumping the gun, but in vioja mahakamani, you saw the role of the prosecutor, isn't it? But we are redefining the role of the prosecutor, not just taking cases to court, but we are now standing as ministers of justice. We know we are the gatekeepers to the criminal justice system. So we have to take our role very seriously. The other interventions probably we've done are the practice directions on privacy. So ensuring that all charge sheets now, especially when it comes to children, have initials, because we know that is one of the rights enshrined in the Constitution and also in the Children's Act, that we are supposed to ensure that people don't, you see, the way a child can be victimized, because the whole public knows their name, they've done a small offense, so use of initials in our charge sheets, and also issued practice directions when it comes to legal representation for prosecutors. We might not really be the ones appointing this legal representative, but ensuring that we inform the court that this is a child and they require legal representation and that should be appointed to them. So those are some of the interventions we've made. We are doing the children's guide now. This is very specific on children. It will be a prosecutor's guide to children. It's actually almost being launched. So a prosecutor, from the time they get into ODPP, as part of the induction, they will be taught how do you treat a child. They will have access to information through the guide. So how do you treat a child in conflict? How do you treat a child victim? How do you treat a child witness? And also availing of pretrial rooms. One of the issues that we found was that we were meeting child witnesses in the morning. But this is something that is changing now with the introduction of the child-friendly interview rooms. So these are pretrial rooms designated at the prosecutor's office that will just be for interviewing children. So they're child-friendly, have child-friendly facilities. We can get access to counselors and all that. Gitari or Honorable Kibosia, they are prepared to give their testimony. And if they are not, we can actually properly inform the court that probably we need more time. So those are some of the interventions we are doing as an office. We hope that when you come, you will also, because I'm sure one or two of you will come, we hope that you will come and enrich what we are doing within the ODPP. So also some of the interventions we've done is plea bargaining and diversion. And these are alternatives in the criminal justice system. So when I talk about plea bargaining, this is an alternative to trial, and it is also available to children. I will give an experience of how we started doing plea bargaining, especially for children. In the year 2016, with the support of USDOJ, Madam Tomika, and Caroline Mutai being there also, they assisted us to do a service week. And the main focus was whether we can incorporate plea bargaining in children cases. And plea bargaining is not something that is very new, not very old, because it started in the year 2008. The amendments in the Criminal Procedure Code were made in the year 2008, but the uptake had been a bit slow. It was only being used in the High Court, especially for the murder cases. But for the lower court, really, there wasn't a lot of the first service week. So that we see, can it work? Would it be beneficial to children? So when I talk about plea bargaining, this is a negotiation between an accused person. When it comes to children, we call them subjects, between the subject, and I have to state, Honorable Justice Gitari was actually our presiding chief magistrate then in 2016. So it was a negotiation between plea bargaining is a negotiation between the accused person, the subject when it comes to children, and the prosecutor. So there are a couple of things they're negotiating about, but it is mainly on the charge. So when you look at section 137A of the CPC, there are those things, what you can negotiate. Maybe it's a reduction of a charge. So that can be either from murder to manslaughter. That's why I said there had been a lot of uptake in the High Court. So you can reduce a charge, you can withdraw some charges. Maybe you have many counts and you're bargaining, so you can offer. So everyone has to come with something on the table. So you can offer to withdraw some of the charges, but this is in exchange of a guilty plea. So at the end of the day, in a plea bargaining process, there has to be a guilty plea entered in court. So the parties really have been the prosecutor, the child through their representative, because we are big on legal representation. So a child through their legal representative is also involved. The court is usually an arbitrator. We try to call them an independent arbitrator, because that is one of the safeguards that is there in the plea bargaining process. Because after you negotiate, you have to take the plea agreement and what is contained in the plea agreement. Let's say you reduce the charge, you have to take it to the court so that this person pleads guilty to the charge that is now being offered. So the court is an independent arbitrator. It is neutral in the negotiation process, but it plays a crucial role when it comes now to the pleading guilty, because they have to, you see, with plea bargaining, there's a lot of things that the subject is going to give up. The first one is the right to full trial, isn't it? To examine their witnesses. Those are rights that they'll have to give up, because now they're going to plead guilty. And cross-examine witnesses, right to plead not guilty is also a right that they'll be giving up. So all these things. So the court has to be very, I'd say very, it has to really be concentrate on what is actually being done, so that we are not also maybe, especially with the power dynamics between a prosecutor and a child, we are not trying to get them to get into deals and stuff like that. So the court is our neutral arbitrator, and they play a very big safeguard. So after the plea bargaining, once the subject and their legal representative goes to court, they will plead guilty to something. So let's say if it is a manslaughter murder charge, they'll plead guilty to the manslaughter, and the court will go to the sentencing. So once sentence is passed, you cannot appeal. You can only appeal as to the extent and legality of the sentence. So you cannot, all these other things that you can appeal, you can't. It's just up to the extent and legality of the sentence. So I think that is plea bargaining in a nutshell. The other strategic intervention we've done as an office is diversion. And diversion is big, especially when it comes to children. And diversion, we call it an alternative to prosecution, because plea bargaining would be an alternative to trial, because now the subject in plea bargaining the witnesses will not come to court, all that, but they will plead guilty and they will be sentenced to something. But in diversion, now it is a whole new concept, an alternative to prosecution in totality. So with diversion, the process started in 2018, where of course, there's the whole problem statement on the why. Why are we doing plea bargaining? Why are we doing diversion? And the first thing is the backlog of cases in court. I'm sure you've gone for your judicial attachment. You've seen how it is in court and the magnitude of cases Honorable Wanjala and Kibose probably have on a daily basis. So one of the things was the backlog in courts. How can we ease all these cases? The second one was they are both international best practices, I'd say. Plea bargaining has been used in the jurisdictions like US for a couple of years. Diversion has been used almost all over the world for a couple of years. So it has worked in other jurisdictions. So why not also try and implement it in our jurisdiction? And also the limited prosecutorial resources. Yesterday I said we are one of the new kids on the block. We are established under the Constitution of Kenya. So as we are setting up office, of course, there are those teething problems. And one of them was the limited prosecutorial capacity, that we didn't have too many prosecutors comparing to the caseload. So how can we get these cases out of the system so that we can concentrate on the ones that really require our full weight? So and also the overcrowded prisons. I'm sure the prisons deputy commissioner here came and told you about the situation in the prisons. So these are tools. And we also did something called an All for Justice project. especially when we wanted to come up with what are the strategies that we can use to decongest some of these prisons. So diversion was one of them. So in 2018, we began the process. In 2019, we launched the diversion policy and the diversion guidelines and explanatory notes. So as I've said, diversion is an alternative to prosecution. It offers a second chance, and all world over, children have been the biggest beneficiaries of the diversion process. And we thought that even in Kenya, we can mainstream and see how children now can also be some of the biggest beneficiary of diversion. So the other people also, we didn't just consider children, though they are our core. We also considered adults who have done petty offenses, the vulnerable. People, you've had people talking about mental health and how do we treat these vulnerable people in the society, people who have mental health conditions, people who are the aged and elderly, how do you treat them in the criminal justice system? So diversion was proposed. So it's really big on restorative justice. When you talk about diversion, it is really restorative justice. We talk about diversion as in the process as a pre-charge and a post-charge process. Pre-charge being that we can do diversion as we're making the decision to charge. So you make the decision to charge, there's enough evidence. I'm sure Honorable Kibosia has talked about the children in need of care and protection. These are children probably, as the Children's Act states, these are children who are neglected. These are children who have suffered offenses against them. So we are trying to distinguish. We're not offering it to the children in need of care and protection, but the children in conflict with the law. So there has to be an offense that has been committed. And from the evidence on record, there has to be sufficient evidence so that we are also not saying we are diverting people who have not committed crimes. They have to have committed crimes, even the children. So it's a pre-charge. So we do the pre-charge process. Once we make the decision to charge, one of the options, and especially for children, we're told to consider diversion in all cases involving children. So our first consideration is, would diversion be appropriate in this particular instance? If yes, we can do it pre-charge. If not, then we take it to court for charging. We also have the post-charge process. Sometimes these cases, we have cases right now ongoing in court, and we can actually try and see, can we divert these cases out of the system, especially the children cases? And some of the principles that are guiding diversion, number one is the acceptance of responsibility. We are not trying to divert people who are saying they've not committed an offense. So they have to accept responsibility and say, yes, I committed this offense and I want to get a second chance through the diversion process, because it would be very unfair for someone to say they've not committed an offense and you're pushing diversion to them. It goes against the rules. Yeah. So the first one is the acceptance of responsibility. There's the issue of restitution, rehabilitation. We're big on rehabilitation for children. Actually, the criminal justice system, when it comes to children, the main aim is rehabilitation. So this is one of the avenues we can rehabilitate the children. So rehabilitation and reintegration. So how are these children being integrated back into the society, so that a child has committed an offense. We do not want them to carry a tag, isn't it, as a criminal? So how will the community take them back? So we rely a lot on the Department of Children's Services, Department of Probation, so that they tell us how will the public perceive this child and how can they be best reintegrated. So diversion offers that. And the other thing is we're also guided by the public interest and confidence, because we also do not want to bring back into the community a child who will also be a danger to the society. So we also have to be guided by that and transparency, so that whatever I do in regards to diversion, we are above reproach, so that we don't have people saying it's a corrupt system and all that. So there was need for transparency. So that's why we came up with the policy and the guidelines. So I think that is what, in a nutshell, I'd say about plea bargaining and diversion.
Wow, thank you very much for that elaborate presentation on what the Office of the ODPP is doing. And we're going to proceed to, I think you've covered most of the questions would have asked you, but
one thing maybe I can talk about, especially in plea bargaining, it is not, it's not permitted in law in sexual offenses and crimes against humanity. I think that's what I'd forgotten. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll hand over to Vianney to continue.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now we are going to Detective Lawrence Okoth. Briefly introduce yourself, then also your co-panelists, Dr. Ferreira and Professor Julius Law Nielsen, will introduce themselves. Then I can ask questions, then each one of you can say something. So Detective, please.
Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that the DCI commitment on child protection is very well demonstrated on the very important work that we do and the investment that the DCI has done towards child protection in Kenya. In the year 2016, the DCI established a unit, a specialized unit that is specifically dealing with crimes against children. And that is where I work from. As you had been told, I am a cyber forensic expert, and I work at the cyber section of that unit, where we focus on online crimes against children, and the perpetrators that we are dealing with are those who are using internet to abuse children. The unit has got a branch in Mombasa, and we have an expansion plan to all regions within Kenya, and it is premised at the DCI Academy, South Sea, because of the serenity and the environment that allows us to deal with children cases. So most of the crimes that we get is are in form of cyber that are facilitated with technology. And at the cyber section, you understand that we have a national forensic lab, but with the focus on child-related cases, we had to come up with a standalone cyber forensic lab that is purely handling crimes, online crimes against children. So as we say outside there, it takes a network to beat a network. So we have partnered and we have collaborated with other law enforcement agencies internationally and some other stakeholders within the country and even non-governmental organizations. So at the unit, we are connected to some database. We work closely with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It is a non-governmental organization in the US, whereby in the US, it is a law that all the electronic service providers like Facebook, Google, TikTok, when they detect anything to do with child abuse, they have to report to National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So through the cooperation and connection to their database, we are able to get cyber intelligence of those reported cases within the Kenyan domain. Then through the information that we get, we are able to do due diligence and obtain through legal requirements, we are able to investigate the accounts that have been reported. And the unit is victim-centric. We are focusing primarily to recover the victims of abuse, and the secondary role is to arrest and prosecute the offenders. So through the reported media, we are able to identify the geographical location of the offenders using the IP address of the gadgets that were used. We are able to identify the gadget. We are able to do triage and forensic examination and get the evidence that was reported. And we are also connected to the Interpol International Child Sexual Offenses Database. It is called ICSE database, whereby we are now joining a global platform. So you understand that internet has got no jurisdiction. It is a borderless, restricted kind of crime. You find you have an offender here and multiple victims are all over the globe, across the globe. So we have to partner. That is why we are saying we need a network to fight a network. The network we are fighting are those people who are connected and are dealing with child pornography. They are trading on it, with it, and they are using it as a currency also to lure other children or to extort from other victims, to make other children victims. So we have partnered and collaborated with international agencies, and we are able to ensure that the internet is safe for our children for the future. The issues that we are here discussing today, like child sexual exploitation and abuse online, attacks the innocence of a child and also the well-being of that child. So with the focus that the DCI has put in place to ensure that we investigate this kind of cases is a clear demonstration that we are working towards protecting our children and the future of this country. We also do public outreach by sensitization, and we realized as a gap there's willful blindness outside there. People share child pornographic materials, and at times you find it with good intention for the officer to investigate. You just share from WhatsApp to WhatsApp. But the law in Kenya criminalizes that. Under Section 16 of the Sexual Offences Act, it criminalizes the sharing of child pornographic materials. So by the good intention of sharing, you are already committing an offense. So we have also partnered with the Communication Authority of Kenya, and through Communication Authority of Kenya, they have hosted a free training at Afralty, whereby you can show interest by applying through email, then you are rostered so that you take up that course. It is free, just to ensure that people are aware outside there what online crimes against children are. So illegal instruments that we are using that is helping us to investigate. And as I told you, the internet is a global thing. There is borderless. So we ascribe to international legal instruments and regional instruments. And also we have the national laws that we use to prosecute and try to combat this kind of crimes. The kind of cases that we receive are, it comes in different manifestations. We have sextortion, where you find that someone is using a picture of a victim to threaten, to extort from the family or the victim herself. We also have cyberbullying. Someone is just torturing the victim online. It is also affecting the adult populations, and the kind of crimes that are more prominent, like online child sexual abuse, is very high, such that in the year 2019, when we connected to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database, we could get at least 30 to 50 cases reported in a day. But now with the pandemic, corona pandemic, most children spend most of their time on the internet through online schooling and entertainment and so forth. So the reports increased. We experienced an upsurge of reports on cyber tips, and it is still not clear whether it is the pandemic that increased the cases, online cases against children, or was it something that just exploded because of COVID. Now it was experienced a lot. It is still not clear, but the magnitude of online crimes against children is very, very big. So that is what, in a nutshell, our unit does to help protect children online. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Detective Okoth. Now we'll hear from Dr. Ferreira, who will go first, and then Professor Julia Sloth-Nielsen. And as they introduce themselves and as they speak to us, I would like them to talk about also, how do we strike a balance between the children's right to privacy, if they have one, and our supervision with what they do with the internet and smartphones, for that matter. And also, in most cases, you find that the parents are working and they leave the children with nannies, and there is no one to maybe follow up every time with what the child is doing online. So maybe you can also touch on that. How do we ensure that our children are still safe from online abuse, even when we go to work at 8 and come back late in the night? Yeah, so we could start with Dr. Ferreira, please. You're welcome.
Good morning. I wish to thank the invitation of the organizing committee. I'm from Portugal, from Catholic University and the Law School of Porto, and I was invited to talk about child protection online. So I would start my presentation, if you will. I would like to share, if someone could please enable me to share the screen, because someone stopped me from it. Let's see. Okay, it's possible now. Now, what I bring you today is on online child protection, particularly the guidelines from ITU concerning this problem. So the International Telecommunication Union, called ITU, is an organization, specialized agency from United Nations concerning telecommunication, and it was founded in 1865 to facilitate international connectivity in communication networks. It was a very long time ago, but let's see what we now need to see. So ITU Global's membership includes 193 member states and 900 companies. So the explosion of information and communication technologies has created unprecedented opportunities for children and young people to communicate, socialize, share, learn, access information, and express opinions on matters that affect their lives and their communities, while at the same time posing significant challenges to children's safety. In a world where the internet permeates almost every aspect of life, keeping young users safe online has emerged as an increasingly urgent issue. So the first guidelines from the ITU concerning child online protection date back to 2009, but last year these guidelines were changed and improved. I would like you to see a small video. Don't worry, it's very short. I had two, but I'm sorry. Stop. Yes. Stop. I'm sorry. Okay, so
the world is rapidly changing. The internet is offering new opportunities, transforming our societies and evolving the way we interact, learn, and socialize. Every child needs to be able to benefit from these innovations. With every advancement, though, come new challenges, and the internet comes with its hazards and threats. Children can be exposed to shocking images and videos, interact with bad-intentioned people, get trolled on their social media, and bullied. This can affect the child very profoundly, hampering the development and create depression and isolation. Every child needs to feel and be safe online. Today, 71% of young people are connected. 1/3 of young people in 30 countries report being cyberbullied, with 1 in 5 skipping school because of it. 80% of children in 25 countries report feeling in danger of sexual abuse or exploitation online. Our vision is to create a world where children can be connected and able to fully benefit from the opportunities of a safe, trusted online environment. Our mission is to raise awareness, provide resources and tools to support children and their families, support industry and government stakeholders in crafting corporate and national child online protection policies and strategies. ITU holds the unique position with more than a decade of child online protection activities worldwide. ITU and its partners propose a global and collaborative approach based on proven expertise and successful technical assistance. By 2023, we aim to protect and empower millions of children through connectivity, where we aim to connect 10 million adolescents and equip them with digital safety skills. We will foster engagement with challenges, surveys, and polls, disseminate content and guides around the world in 15 national languages, run at least 50 train-the-trainer programs with ICT professionals, reach at least 5 million children with educational safety programs, and reinforce frameworks by providing 30 countries and the private sector with strategies and policies they can apply.
Okay.
Join us. Together, we will protect and empower children.
Okay, so back to my presentation. Sorry. So, as I was saying, this ITU has made relevant child online protection guidelines, and it concerns three aspects of our world. For one side, guidelines for parents and educators. On the other side, for policymakers for every state, and on the last side, guidelines for the industry. And these are probably the most difficult guidelines to follow, since the industry of concerning children, I imagine, from pornography and also other things, will probably not be so kindly aware of these problems or don't really care about them. So for the parents, they are trying, because we talked about the institutions here today, but we didn't talk a lot about the parents, and especially here in this protection online, because preventing starts at home. So in order to keep your children safe, it is necessary that parents are aware of the dangers of internet and teach their children how to be safe online. They have to try to identify the technology, the devices, consider filtering and blocking and monitoring programs, and talk about with the children about using the internet. This is one of the concerns. Also, concerning guidelines for educators are very important. Ensure that all devices are secure and password protected. Install antivirus software and firewalls. Ensure that there is a policy which details how technology can be used. Consider how to manage taking and storing images of pupils. Ensure that the internet feed provided by the school is filtered and monitored. Raise awareness of the importance of digital footprint and online reputation. All of these are very important. So for policymakers, with an understanding of existing national activities, interventions and frameworks together with examples from other countries, policymakers should be in a position to start to plan for the development of a national child online protection strategy. So they present us with a checklist concerning legal framework, regulatory framework, reporting of illegal content, reporting of user content, concerns also actors and stakeholders, research, education, digital literacy and competency, educational resources, child protection, national awareness, tools, services, and settings. So a lot to be concerned and to pay attention on establishing this online protection system for each state. And for the industry, there were several guidelines. I don't have them all here. If you are interested, I can provide this presentation for you. But for the industry, basically, she can identify, prevent, and mitigate the adverse impacts of these technologies on children and young people's rights, and identify opportunities to support the advancement of children and young people's rights by taking a number of actions, such as develop a child protection and safeguarding policy, and or integrate specific risks and opportunities pertaining to children and young people's rights into company-wide policy commitments, adopt an empowerment and education-based approach to child protection, consider children's data protection rights, their right to privacy and to freedom of speech, while offering education and guidance through the company services. In states with lack of adequate legal frameworks of the protection of children and young people's rights to privacy and freedom of expression, companies should ensure policies and practices are in line with international standards. So we could talk a lot more of this. Since Kenya is in Africa, I brought here also today the beginning of the launch of COP guidelines in Africa. So the key issues under discussion here in Africa are governments to prioritize COP implementation at national level, rigorous and creative COP awareness campaigns being deployed, alignment of ITU COP reporting with We Protect reporting at Africa Union level, strengthen and prioritize the role of different relevant stakeholders at the national level of COP implementation, government financing approaches to COP campaigns and programs, the role of digital skills and literacy programs in the educational curriculum. And in conclusion, for this continent, for Africa, it's important to identify and participate of all stakeholders in design and implementation of national strategies. It's necessary to translate COP awareness materials in local languages at national and regional levels. It's necessary to promote understanding and child safety culture among stakeholders at national level, encourage other child protection organizations to mainstream COP issues in their work, and encourage knowledge sharing among stakeholders at national and regional levels. To finalize my intervention, I would like to call here attention. I don't know if you all remember, but in 2015, there was a very concerning problem concerning social media, Facebook and otherwise. That was the Blue Whale Challenge. It started on Russia, and it consisted of 50 days where someone online told you to do something and different tasks every day. And the first tasks were inoffensive, and each day the task got harder and harder. And the last task was you killed yourself. This was a very problematic issue. It led to the loss of lives of several teenagers around the world. As I say, it started in Russia. And eventually, some people stepped forward saying they were the instigators of this suicide. It's not completely known if these people that stepped forward, these Russian people that stepped forward, were indeed responsible for this Philip Budaykin, this Ilya Sidorov, and this Nikita Niaronov stepped forward. And they say they instigated, for instance, this postman Ilya Sidorov says he persuaded 32 children to join the group and follow his commands, and probably then committed suicide. So how do we prevent these things from happening? In my opinion, events such as the Blue Whale Challenge will need a lot of prevention inside the home with parents and then in schools with educators. We need that parents and children have a bond, and that children can easily access the parents with their difficulties from a daily basis, and they can talk about their problems, and they are not isolated, because we also have bullying, cyberbullying, and bullying at school. So children today are very much tied up to a computer and to the social lines. So if the internet social lines. So if we don't have this awareness, especially with the parents and the surrounding group, we may lose these children either to Blue Whale Challenge or other types of bullying or sexual exploitation and others. So I try to keep it short because we are probably very long with this session. So once again, I thank you for the invitation, and I'm available for answering any questions.
Nafira. And one of the things that stood out for me from your presentation was the need for parents to create a bond with their children, such that the children can always reach out to them in case of any suspected cases of abuse that they are having. So the parents who are here, please don't put on a very tough face, be that parent that wants to create a bond with their child or children. So right now, I want to invite Professor Julia to take the virtual podium to introduce herself and then also tell us what she does and also what she thinks about some of the questions I posed. Right. Professor Julia, you're welcome.
Thank you very much to the organizers. Thank you for inviting me. I'm now going to try and share my screen. I might not be successful, but let me try anyway. Except that I've been disabled for screen sharing. Can I maybe be undisabled? Right, I'm assuming everybody can see my screen. Can I get an answer from anybody? Organizers?
Yes, we can see you, Julia.
Thank you very much. So I was a professor at the University of the Western Cape. I finished at the end of last month after 27 years. I've taught many Kenyan students, both at UWC, but also in my capacity as a part-time chair of children's rights in the developing world at Leiden University, including somebody who I think is coming on the program later, Juliet. And I have worked extensively on children's rights in Africa on various topics and themes. And like Robert Nanimo yesterday, I was a member of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child for a 5-year period, which ended in 2016. I've recently been doing work on sexual exploitation of children on the one hand, and I'll explain in what capacity, and then also on children's rights to privacy in the online environment. And I'm interested that one of your hosts today talked about whether children have a right to privacy, and I will explain that they indeed do have a right to privacy. So I will also unfortunately be repeating things that have already been said in this session, which is a little bit unfortunate because I didn't know what the other participants were going to say, but I will try and minimize any repeats for your benefit, because I realize this has been a long session. So what are some of the overarching considerations in the African context? First of all, one has to look at the fact that it's often thought that Africa consists of rural areas and extreme poverty, people don't have access to devices, and indeed smartphone penetration currently stands at far below 50% of the total population in most African countries. But there are differences in, for instance, my own home country, South Africa, in Kenya and in Tanzania, and some other countries in West Africa like Nigeria, not to mention countries in the north of Africa such as Algeria and Tunisia. Internet penetration generally in March 2020 stood at nearly 40% of the total population, compared to the rest of the world where it stood at 63% virtually. In a few countries such as Ghana and South Africa, smartphone and internet penetration go hand in hand. But for other countries such as Kenya, Nigeria, and Senegal, according to available data that is being consulted, internet penetration is way ahead of smartphone penetration. But as the detective pointed out, things have also changed quite dramatically under lockdown, under COVID-19. And I would imagine that this research is probably by now already quite out of date, as access to smartphones has, generally speaking, increased, and also usage of the internet via smartphones. So as found out in a report that I'm still busy completing for the Centre for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria, the legal and regulatory environments in the African context are generally quite weak, and in some cases they're absolutely non-existent. I know Kenya does not fall into that category. Kenya's regulatory environment is quite good. But there are many countries with either emerging regulatory environments or who are busy working on regulatory environments. For instance, Zimbabwe has just been dealing with a new bill in this regard. And very often the criminal law, and I'm going to be focusing towards the end of my presentation on access to justice, because this is about a child justice conference. Oftentimes, the criminal law itself is based on very dated definitions of, for instance, child pornography, what possession means, what premises are, because a chat room is not a premise, it's not a building. And oftentimes, there are also very weak evidentiary tools and laws which impede investigation and also prosecution. Government regulations of internet service providers is not always in place or optimal, and state parties have great difficulties in holding transnational multinationals to account. So there's a recent case in South Africa of a girl who was being stalked on Facebook and wanted the information to be taken down. The local office of Google in South Africa could not or would not do this. And she was forced to institute legal proceedings in California, which is obviously prohibitively expensive. Now, most of these risks in the online protection environment have already been mentioned. Exposure to violent sexual and violence and sexual content, cyber aggression and harassment, exposure of children to gambling, exploitation and abuse. The previous speaker already mentioned promotion of or incitement to suicide or other life-threatening activities, and the potential of recruitment or radicalization by groups designed as armed groups, terrorist groups, or violent extremist groups through online sources. Girls exhibit a range of particular concerns, notably in the African context, and there is emerging new research which brings the 2016 research that's mentioned here a bit more up to date. But in 2016, research showed that girls had much less access to digital media than boys, that girls were over-sexualized in their portrayal in the online environment, that the online environment enables greatly the context for sexting and sextortion and cyberbullying, as the detective mentioned, and that there's a discourse around the criminalization of teenagers, not only girls, who distribute self-generated sexually explicit content, with the real risk of these being spread, going viral, as you young people would call it, without authorization. And I'll come back to talk about the decriminalization in relation to self-generated sexually explicit materials discussion later, because I know it has been an issue in the Kenyan context too. The online grooming risks I'll also come back to discuss in more detail. There's the risk of cyberbullying and harassment and stalking of girls in particular. And the explicit transposition of child protection and safeguarding policies to the online environment is a requirement that has now been set in various regional and international law documents that I will conclude with. Now, mention has been made of privacy, but I want to start with access to information and freedom of expression, because both the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Charter, African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, promote access to information from a diversity of sources, which is a child's right. Much of the discussion today that I've been listening to has focused on child protection from harmful information, online radicalization, pedophilia, gambling. And the fine line that has to be drawn is between the protection arguments and the much less discussed promotion of civil rights and freedoms argument, which would mitigate against censorship, which would deprive children from having the benefit of a variety of points of view. Because the internet provides unprecedented opportunities for young people to also demonstrate their evolving capacities. This is also a right of the child. Article 12 of the Convention of the Rights of the Child is central to that treaty. And it also provides opportunities for children to exhibit agency by acting independently of their parents and adults. So it has to always balance the protection arguments against the child rights benefits that can ensue from their access to digital media. The mention has already been made to the need for age-appropriate information being provided, digital literacy, from a plurality of sources. So not just the internet, but also from other forms of mass media. So privacy, as was put into question, is also a right of the child. And I refer here in particular to Article 10 of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. No child shall be subject to arbitrary or unlawful interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, provided that parents or legal guardians shall have the right to exercise reasonable supervision over the conduct of their children. The child has the right to the protection of the law against such interference with their privacy or attacks. So some of the elements of the right to privacy include that filters and other barriers to be provided for by law, and they should be proportionate to ensure that they don't unnecessarily interfere with the child's right to privacy. Digital service providers should be encouraged to provide children with age-appropriate and intelligible content labeling. Data breaches related to children's information and surveillance via digital media must be controlled by governments, or unwarranted interference with privacy. High standards of transparency and accountability on the part of private commercial interests should be required. And there's emerging research done particularly by Sonia Livingston at the London School of Economics, which shows that children themselves demand different standards of privacy depending on who they are interacting with, what they would tell their teacher, what they would want their teachers to know, what they would tell their parents, and what they would want their parents to know, and what they would tell their peers are very different. And this is obviously something that you as young students would understand. What you will talk to each other about is very different from what you would say to your professors, for instance. So I come to where the source of some of this information is, and now I'm going to look at two very recent documents. One is, okay, sorry, I've got one more slide first on privacy. Privacy is related to dignity and safety, and threats to privacy may come from a variety of sources. And I have had a couple of students write very interesting theses on sharenting, which is where parents post pictures of their children naked in the bath, what online, which is an interference with the child's right to privacy. Threats can also come from peers, from educators, or strangers. and strong regulations and access to remedies are required, robust measures in public settings, for instance, in internet cafes, in university and school libraries, to ensure privacy protection. So I come now to the first recent document, which is a general comment. General comment being an explanation or an explanatory tool produced by the city monitoring body, the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. General comment number 7 was released in March this year, and you can find it on the website of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. And it's an explanation of Article 27 of the Charter. Article 27 deals with the protection of the child from sexual abuse and exploitation. Obviously, the Charter, having been drafted in 1990, predates the digital era. So at the time, it was thought to apply only to the offline sexual abuse environment. But the general comment brings this up to date by covering both online and offline sexual abuse. I'm just going to give you a few highlights from the general comment. I was the consultant who authored it, actually, although it was a collaborative process. There were many workshops and many conferences and so forth that went into the shaping of the general comment. But it generally adheres to a do no harm principle as regards to its approach to victims. So it would be more sensible not to, for instance, prosecute, because it will do more harm to the victim, expose him or her to secondary or tertiary trauma, then that should be the approach followed by the authorities. It's also very important that the so-called age of sexual consent be defined. And it's pointed out in the general comment that many states distinguish consensual sexual activity between adolescent peers, not predatory older adults. This is both in the online and the offline environment. And therefore, the general comment advocates, this was quite contentious in some of the consultations that were engaged in, and the general comment advocates decriminalization of peer-to-peer sexual activity, provided that it is consensual, that it's not exploitative, and the so-called Romeo and Juliet rule that the children are close in age, typically 2 years apart or 3 years apart. And the reason for this is that it avoids driving teenage sexual activity underground so that it's hidden and that teenagers cannot be provided with advice and education. The general comment continues to say that responses to consensual sexual activities such as sexting between adolescents should be preventive. They should embrace safeguarding, and I can talk some more about safeguarding if anyone is interested. And as mentioned by the the representative of the NDPP earlier this morning, that restorative justice approaches should be used wherever possible. So I'm talking also now to children who might find themselves as accused persons in the child justice, juvenile justice system. I said I'd come back to talk a little bit more about grooming. It's widely being recognized now in this research that's been done inter alia by the London School of Economics, but also by the UNICEF Innocenti Research Center in Florence and various other parties, that the grooming issue is that it moves between online and offline environments. So it can be start offline and then move to the online environment or vice versa. The general comment recommends criminalization of some aspects of the grooming process. For instance, the production of CSAM, which is the accepted word now or term now for child sexual abuse materials. One doesn't talk anymore of child pornography, according to the so-called terminology guidelines, which I will also highlight on my very last slide. Online child protection also requires that live streaming, the use of webcams, and so forth in the production of child sexual abuse materials be incorporated in criminal law. Here we do not have a physical record, a picture, a screenshot necessarily of the child sexual abuse materials. So one must recreate and reinvent the criminal law to accommodate these new forms of production of child sexual abuse materials. And as with consensual sexual activity, sexting between children and adolescent peers should be exempt from prosecution, and the child should not be prosecuted for the production of self-generated materials. There was a case a few years ago already in South Africa where a girl of 16 was prosecuted for taking pictures of her upper body naked and sending them to her boyfriend, and she was charged with the production of pornography, which would have meant, had she been convicted, that she would automatically go onto the national list of sex offenders for the rest of her life, which would limit her employment opportunities. Now, access to justice, and here I'm drawing chiefly from the second document that I said I would refer to, which is the very recent general comment. It's at the bottom of the screen there, the general comment of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. That's the Geneva Committee that monitors the convention. General Comment 25, which was also released in March this year, on children's rights in the digital era. And I'm drawing in the last bullet from paragraph 118. It's a lengthy document and it covers many of the aspects that I've already talked about, such as freedom of expression, right to privacy, and the risk of various harms to children. But the general comment also makes the point that children face much greater challenges in accessing justice in relation to the digital environment. And the difficulties that the general comment highlights are difficulties in obtaining evidence, and we've heard from the detective how those challenges are being met in Kenya. Difficulties in identifying who the perpetrators are, children's and their parents' lack of knowledge about what constitutes a rights violation, as well as fear of reprisals by peers or fear of social exclusion should they seek justice or a remedy. And then, of course, there's a complexity of investigation and prosecution of cases involving rights breaches, particularly because of the transnational nature of the crimes that may be implicated. You may have a victim that's in the Philippines, an internet service provider that's in the US, and a user that is in the Netherlands. And I'm talking now about a real life case. And what the general comment then advocates is that child-friendly channels should be created to allow children to safely seek advice and assistance, especially when it comes to self-generated sexually explicit content, so that they can be educated as to the dangers and the perils of having that information or those images in cyberspace where they might never be forgotten. So my very last slide, and where I will conclude, because as law students, you will be eager now to go and find these materials and do your own research on this, are the sources that I mentioned. The so-called terminology guidelines were developed in 2018. You can find them on the website of the UN CRC committee. They were developed by an organization called ECPAT, which is about ending sexual exploitation of children. It was a very consultative process, and they're very useful. Then there's general comment number 7 that just came out, and then general comment number 25 of the CRC committee. And with that, I thank you and open the floor for questions, and hand back to the organizers.
Yes, I believe now we have a full appreciation of what online child protection entails, and also how it relates with access to justice and privacy issues. And because of time, we will not have the Q&A. We will merge it with the third session. Right now, I would like to welcome the MC for further instructions to us. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you so much for that session, and thank you to all of our panelists for giving us that wonderful session. So we shall now proceed to our break, which shall be for 15 minutes. So everybody shall be expected to return at 12:10. So yes, and if you have any questions for the third panel session, kindly just write them on a piece of paper and leave them with the ushers. So yes, we may now convene. For the online people, we'll be back at 12:10.
Yeah. All right.
Yes. Sorry, honey.